had become a tyrant. Al Smith had been governor of New York and ran for president. Frank Smith, a St. Louis businessman, was my father-in-law. Frank once told me, Coolidge is too far left for me. The Republicans had been decimated in the 1932 presidential election and took another hard hit in the 1934 congressional elections. They were down to just 25 members of the U.S. Senate and 103 members of the House of Representatives. This put Roosevelt in absolute command. And in 1935, he initiated what some historians call the Second New Deal. Such things as the Social Security Act, the Banking Act, the Wagner National Labor Relations Act, the Wealth Tax Act, the Employment Relief Act, which created the WPA to try to tend to these of 20% unemployment. Thus, the governmental action of the New Deal, coupled with the fact that President Roosevelt later appointed 8 of the 9 Supreme Court judges, and then concluding with the Chief Justiceship of Earl Warren, led to the end of the passive old jurisprudence and to the rise of the active new jurisprudence. Today, 8 federal district judges will enter this 21st century courthouse. That's 4 times the 2 that entered the Market Street Courthouse 65 years ago. If back then, Judge Charles Davis had predicted to Judge George Moore that sometime in this century it would have taken as many as 8 federal judges and 4 magistrates to handle the work that Davis and Moore did, Moore might have said to Charles Davis, "Charlie, old boy, you must be smoking some pot." I will leave it to the current federal judges to predict what will be the additions in terms of number of judges in this century. I would have predicted it, but the wind's about to blow away my page. Isn't that good? That's good. More wind. Today's federal judges are much more than black-robed umpires presiding over traditional civil and criminal trials. Today's federal judges are called upon to give meaning and to statutory authority and to constitutional guarantees. And as such, they are inescapably involved in social and political public policy. For example, a federal judge can be called upon to supervise a public school system. A federal judge can be called upon to supervise a discredited police department, such as in Los Angeles. A federal judge may have to monitor an environmental cleanup. A federal judge may be required to supervise conditions in a prison or in a jail. And a federal judge even has the power to split in 2 one of the nation's largest corporations. It is a great compliment to the overall common sense of the federal judiciary that Congress often passes ultimate decision-making authority to the federal courts, confident in their belief that the judges will make their decisions fair and square. Congress sometimes calls on the federal court to decide matters which the Congress cannot decide. I remember a committee meeting back many years ago, and I was sitting around the committee table. Fritz Mondale was then a senator and was on my left. Gaylord Nelson, a great friend of both of us, was on my right. We were working on an age discrimination bill. And I said to Mondale, I said, "Fritz, God, I wouldn't want Averell Harriman, who was then in his 80s, flying my TWA flight back and forth to St. Louis." I said, you know, we should be only concerning ourselves with unreasonable discrimination, age discrimination. And Mondale said, Well, how do you define what's reasonable and what's unreasonable? With that, Gaylord Nelson perked up. He said, "What the hell do you think we've got federal judges for?" He said, "They've got plenty of time. Let them figure it out." In Madison, it ultimately led to 8 federal district judges here in the Eastern District. I think he would have been further surprised to learn that this new courthouse will house 4 times as many employees as the entire federal judiciary system back when Marbury was decided. But there is no turning back to the good old days, which quite frankly weren't all that good all of the time. With the recent affirmation of the Miranda Doctrine in a 7-2 decision written by Chief Justice Rehnquist, I think we can conclude there will be no wholesale return to a limited role for the federal judiciary. But more important than what the external beauty of this Helmuth and Obata designed courthouse, more important than the building is what goes on inside the building. Federal judges see to it that our Constitution, we have a script up here. James, you're ready? Right. It's federal courts and federal judges that breathe life into our Constitution. The judges and magistrates who serve in this building are worthy of that great cause. Now let me conclude. In 1932, Guy Thompson, the founding partner of the law firm that I'm so proud to be associated with, Thompson Coburn, was the speaker at the laying of the cornerstone of the Supreme Court of the United States building in Washington, D.C. He was then president of the American Bar Association. And I will quote some of Guy Thompson's words because I think, given on that occasion, they are still applicable to what we're celebrating here today. Here's what Mr. Thompson said. "This edifice will be a monument to justice, justice which every human being yearns for and is the right of all, justice upon whose ministrations life, liberty, and the assurance of happiness depend. Justice that is the final attribute of God Himself." Thank you.
Don't spoil him. Your program says the next order of business is the cutting of the ribbon, but we have one thing that's unfinished, and so I would... And it reads, Lieutenant Governor for Missouri, Attorney General for Missouri, St. Louis Circuit Attorney, United States Navy, and then it reads Thomas F. Eagleton, United States Courthouse, dedicated September 11, 2000. him up here.
Judge Hanson.
Judge Hanson.
Judge Hamilton.
Anybody see Judge Hanson? They're still on this last.
Saw your newspaper yesterday.